Louis Theroux just dropped a new Netflix documentary called Inside the Manosphere, and it's blown up for all the wrong reasons. It goes deep into the world of influencers like HS TikToky, aka Harrison Sullivan, Myron Gaines from Fresh and Fit, Justin Waller, and Sneaker, the guys pushing looks maxing, gym culture, hypergamy talk, and alpha mindset. The documentary paints it all as toxic, misogynistic, and dangerous. But as someone who has covered the black pill mindset and debunks the autistic, toxic worldview it can give you, I see it differently. This isn't just entertainment, it's mainstream media trying to smear an entire movement of men waking up to how the modern world is rigged against them, and how normie or parental or teacher roles, or even their advice, doesn't work nowadays. Today, we're breaking down the documentary The Black Pill Dangers and why the real problem is the society that created this mess. We're covering Louis Theroux's Inside the Manosphere documentary on Netflix. We'll look at how the documentary portrays the manosphere, the hypocrisy it exposes in some influences, the personal angle from red or black pilled mentality, and this whole culture is both a symptom of a broken society and a warning we can't ignore. Plus, we'll tie it to some solutions because it isn't just about dating, it's about the future of men. Theroux goes inside the world of the manosphere, focusing on figures like HS TikToky, Myron Gaines, Justin Waller, and Sneaker. He films their streams, their OnlyFans agencies, their alpha coaching, and their extreme views on women, money, and masculinity. The documentary highlights the contradictions. Guys who claim to be red-pilled but run OnlyFans empires, push pickup artistry while bragging about sexual conquests, and act insecure when challenged like Myron did. Some people will call this all performative sadism. Harrison's vague definition of a proper man, based on physical skills, wealth, and gain, feels algorithm-driven rather than genuine. Some people would call the whole thing disturbing also. Hypocrisy, misogyny, and exploiting lonely young men during an economic crisis. You can definitely pick up on the insecurity and projection of these men, and you can even break down the video even further, showing how the documentary lets them expose themselves while framing the entire movement as toxic. Theroux's calm, disarming style works. It lets the influencers hang themselves, but the documentary completely misses why so many men end up there in the first place. The black pill, the idea that your genetics looks dooms you forever, preys on guys like us. Social cues are already hard, adds to the manosphere's brutal rating system and subhuman talk, and it becomes a trap. The documentary shows influencers pushing gym culture, looks maxing, and transhumanism, clavicular-style self-surgery and steroids, but it doesn't explain how online pressure turns chads into sterile, unhealthy men who chase perfection instead of building families. The best-looking guys end up childless and miserable because the internet convinced them nothing is ever enough. That's not empowerment, that's a dead end. The reactions pick up on the insecurity and the projection. Harrison comes across defensive and controlling. Myron and the others profit from young men's despair, but the documentary frames the entire manosphere as the problem instead of the society that created it. Feminism, dating, economic hopelessness, and a culture that tells men they're disposable unless they're perfect. The real issue isn't the manosphere itself, it's the broken world that pushed millions of men there. Feminism, open borders, and globalist economics destroyed traditional roles, made dating a hypergamous nightmare, and left young men with no purpose. The documentary ignores this gigantic issue and paints the red pill as the villain. But as I've said in my videos before, the solution isn't more black pill despair or looks maxing cult. It's also political and cultural. Strong borders, family first policies, trade schools over useless degrees, and communities that value real masculinity over Instagram filters. Nationalism and anti-globalism address the root causes. economic pressure, demographic change, and the erosion of traditional values. The Manosphere is a warning sign. When young men, especially autistic or neurodiverse ones, feel the system is rigged against them, they turn to extreme coping mechanisms. The documentary could have explored that. Instead, it just calls it toxic and moves on. The Manosphere isn't the problem, it's a symptom of a society that forgot how to raise strong, purposeful men. Instead, we now have these weak leaders that basically will not do their job and be able to actually overcome all the hurdles of leadership. Instead, they cower or hide behind insecurities, or they hide behind using buzzwords like racism or homophobia or any other such word without other or valid criticism. And with my own journey with autism has showed me, the black pill does tend to lie. Real connections and purpose beat superficial mogging every time. So anyway guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video about me talking about Louis Theroux's new documentary. I was originally actually going to record this with Fjodor, but I changed my mind. I kind of just wanted to talk about the concept around this documentary. And I think that Louis Theroux, he kind of does this, I guess, calm, disarming turn, especially when it comes down to the Boer tribe in Africa, because I remember seeing Louis Theroux interview them, and he tried to disarm and he tried to make out like the Boers are unreasonable or, I guess, irrational. He even did this as well in another part of the documentary where he went actually back to Oranje, where basically they were like preparing for like war, which again, as I've covered in a few of my videos about the Boer tribe, or I guess white South Africans, is that obviously Oranje isn't about white supremacism. It's basically that you can go there if you're self-sufficient, and the problem with the African brain, it cannot comprehend the word maintenance, and because of this, you know, he tries to kind of like frame it or like of a stitch up of, oh, it's just them being racist or horrible, which again with Africa it isn't the case. And obviously the Boers just want to live in peace. They want to basically look after their own people and their own communities, of which Louis Theroux never really explores this, which I think again he's like some biased lefty, but I guess he does it in a way where he isn't like so completely obvious about it compared to someone like with Piers Morgan. And as well, Piers Morgan actually did interview HS TikTok, and there was kind of this funny moment where Piers walked off because he basically called Piers a cock because he actually showed his wife being very promiscuous, and because of this he just kind of just didn't want to do the interview anymore. And obviously HS TikTok is like this like mongrel mutt because his daddy went and blacked his mum, and so obviously typical, you know, single parent after that. And obviously, I think that I've noticed that in a lot of these movements, there's like a lot of mutts in this. Like Andrew Tate, he's half African, he's half white, and Sneaker's like black Asian because I think his mum's like Haitian of something like Filipinos. Like there's a lot of like mutts, and there's also a lot of third worlders that like to go into these like types of movements, because obviously a lot of these people just like very, I guess, like losers. Like they come from third world countries, you know, they want a better life, and obviously someone like Andrew Tate, who's obviously a non-white. And like I said, a lot of it is just filled with non-white people, including Myron, who's basically like, looks like every street that I've ever seen before. But yeah, I think when it comes down to it, he said it's just basically full of loser men or like white cucks that go to these people, because that's why I'm more focused when it comes down to this, the political side of like the Manosphere. Not necessarily these people's like political opinions, because obviously Andrew Tate, for example, he's like anti-white, and Myron, you know, he gets with white women. But I just think it's more of a case of basically that these people just don't really care about that side, and they're just more focused on men being men, which, you know, there is truth to that. But again, a lot of these men are basically not white. They always try and get by white women because obviously, you know, they wouldn't ever want to go into, I guess, the East and basically go get like a brown bride. Like, for example, Sneaker would never live in the West. He would probably end up, well, I mean, there's rumours that he's a homosexual. Quite a lot of projection as well, especially to do with, like, Nick Fuentes, because apparently there's rumours he's a homosexual. And, yeah, I think a lot of these people, that they end up getting very closeted, because obviously they get very frustrated with the hypergamy. And I think that, in my opinion, that pushes them towards homosexuality. But again, that's just probably a lot more my theory, but obviously a lot of these men end up becoming either very celibate or just become volcels, where they basically they can get laid, but they just choose not to. And like I said, a lot of these men probably are closeted, and someone like with like Clavicular, where he's basically just like a discount Patrick Bateman, where I've covered this in my Black Pill video of him basically, you know, he's like a little bit of a psychopath where he's like he almost ran over someone with a Tesla truck, a Tesla Cybertruck, And obviously, like, yeah, this is kind of what either Nietzsche or I guess the film American Psycho warned about, where people go so far into looks maxing. It's kind of like a combination of body dysmorphia and kind of like how the internet is like slowly making people, well, yeah, making a lot of mentally ill people popular. Or I guess like into this case is basically young people or younger men just going insane because, again, the world around them is very unstable, and especially what's happened with to do with Iran and to do with like the Iran-Israel war. I do think that is also played into a factor of world instability, but again, I'll probably won't cover that in this video. And as well, if you want to go into the description with links to my other channels and Discord as well.